So, first one, using the lessons of the web to improve our energy networks. Quick, a couple of words about myself. I'm an analyst for a company called Red Monk. We're what's called an open source analyst company. As James, our founder, likes to say, we're not your mom and dad's analyst company. Typical analyst companies are the likes of Forrester, Gartner, IDC, etc. You charge a fortune for their research. Our research is all published online, open sourced. Everyone has access to it, free and gratis, no charge. Our business model is one of paper. So that's how we work. I blog on greenmonk.net. I'm on Twitter at Tom Raftery. Sorry, at twitter.com/Tom Raftery. My email address is there. My phone number is there. That's my mobile number. This slide deck I'll make available to Johnny afterwards, so and the other one as well, so you can all have access to it. Okay. A guy called Nick Carr wrote a book a number of years ago called The Big Switch. And the main thesis of The Big Switch was that the internet companies need to become more like the utilities in order to survive. So basically, the talking of moving to service models for internet companies, a bit controversial at the time, now mainly accepted, and has become the de facto model for a lot of businesses on the internet now. We looked at this and we said, yeah, that's great, very true, no question about it. But we're turning it on its head, and we're saying that for the utility companies to survive the next few years, they're going to have to model a lot of their stuff on the internet. So we're talking about a move to Web 2 technologies or Web 2 type models for utility companies. Is there anyone here today from a utility company by any chance? Oh, excellent, very good.
With BT.
Oh. Good. So, speaking of BT, this is Alexander Graham Bell, largely credited with the invention of the telephone. This is him with one of his first telephones back in the day. If you were to put Alexander Graham Bell today in front of any of these devices, he'd be scratching his head. He wouldn't know the first thing about them. He wouldn't recognize them as telephones, and even if he did, he'd never figure out how to operate them, unless it was an iPhone. This is Thomas Edison, credited with the invention of the light bulb. Actually, he didn't invent it, he just perfected it and made it commercially viable. Also the inventor of the electrical distribution system known as the grid. If you were to put Thomas Edison in front of any of today's grids, you would recognize him immediately because the change in the grids in the last 100 years has been minimal. I read a report a couple of weeks ago which said that the average age of transformers in Europe is 42 years. They were designed, their average end of life expectancy when they were designed was 40 years. So the grids in Europe are creaking and groaning right now. The electrical system we have today is, I'm going to flip through these quite quickly, is read-only. So very 1.0. It's top-down. The electrical grids are basically LANs, local area networks. They're balkanized islands of power. There is almost no interconnectivity between them. There are some places in Europe where there's better connectivity, but in Ireland we have only one interconnect. That's with Northern Ireland. It's a 250 megawatt interconnect. It's a political interconnect rather than a technical interconnect. In other words, at night time we suck in power from Northern Ireland rather than having the ability to push the other way. There's no interconnect with mainland UK. There's talks of building one, and there are plans underway, but there's none at the moment right now. There's about 500 different grids in mainland US. Electrical grids are buggy. We all know this. They're dumb. They're in fact incredibly dumb. They're so dumb, in fact, that if you get an outage in an electrical grid, say a line goes down, say a digger digs up a cable, you get an outage. The first the utility company knows about it is when their phones start ringing with irate people going, "Where's my power?" Then the utility company has to send out repair crews to try and find out what's gone wrong and to try and localize it. And the only way they can direct the repair crews is by listening to where the phone calls are coming from. And they send them to the general area all the phone calls are coming from. Electrical grids are closed. It's very difficult to become a utility, and they're architected for the past. So, in the past, you had 3, 4, 5 main suppliers of electricity. In Ireland, one, and they were all controlled sources. You had a variable but predictable demand, but a constantly controllable supply. We're now moving into an era when the supply side is becoming variable as well, as more renewables are added onto the grid, and this is going to start causing problems. The grids have been provisioned for hits, and what I mean by that is that you've heard of the Coronation Street effect. That's when, at an ad break in Coronation Street, everyone gets out and turns on the kettle or goes and flushes the toilet or whatever, and this causes a huge surge in the demand for electricity. The electrical companies, the electrical utilities, have to anticipate this and have power on standby waiting to push down the line for instances like that. They have to have generation facilities in place for these kind of spikes in demand. This is actually not spikes in demand for electricity, these are spikes on demand for a website. I like this slide. It's a slide of the Australian Open. It's the traffic on the Australian Open website. And you can see that the Australian Open obviously happens around January every year. And the traffic to the website is growing year on year, but it's only a 1-month spike. This is a slide that's used by the Amazon Web Services crew to promote cloud computing. And what they do is they sell cloud computing to the Australian Open website, so that the Australian Open website don't need to buy enough servers to meet this demand. They literally just turn up their Amazon Web Services coming up to the end of December in anticipation of this kind of a spike, and they can just turn it up a little more, and then they ramp it back down again during February through to the following December. So it's very efficient. And those are the kind of things you need to have in an electrical grid, rather than having enough generation stations to hit this demand and growing. So there are a lot of O&Os that are coming on board now for the utilities, a lot of problems hitting them on the head. This is a graph of the price of electricity, the price of oil. Now it's obviously a little bit out of date. Oil is now down around 60 again. But even if you look at the 60 here and track it back to the 10 back in 98, you can see it's gone up 6-fold in the last 10 years. And I would argue that that 60 is an artificial low brought about by a reduction in economic activity. And I would say that the true price of oil today is around 86. And when we see the ramp up again happen in probably a year, 2 years' time, the price of oil will shoot back up again. It hasn't shot up before that already. Then along comes renewable energy, the big bad guy in utilities' minds, because it's so disruptive to their networks. Brendan mentioned I'm based in Spain at the moment. This is a graph of the power generation and demand from the Spanish grid networks. And at the time that this was taken, the snapshot, you had 17% being taken in, or 17% of the demand being supplied by wind. Spain is very well, Spain is using a lot of wind energy. Right now, Spain, as of January this year, Spain had 15.5 gigawatts, so that's 15,500 megawatts of installed wind. Spain have set a target of reaching 20 gigawatts by 2010. So in 2 years' time, they're going to roll out another 4.5 gigawatt, another 4,500 megawatt of wind. Now, if you think about it, 4,500 megawatts is essentially 4,500 of those big spin turbines, because most of those are between 1 and 2 megawatt each. So, as we had 20,000 megawatts coming from wind in Spain in 2010. When you compare that to the solar in Spain, the supply from solar in Spain is at about 400 megawatts right now, and they've set a target of 3,000 by 2010. But it still shows you the difference between the 3,000 in 2010 from solar and the 20,000 in 2010 from wind. Wind is the dominant and vastly more mature renewable technology right now, even in Spain, a place where you'd expect solar to be very strong. And it is. Spain is the second largest producer of solar energy in the world after Germany.